Today on Straight Talk Africa, the Central African Republic fell into chaos in March 2013. This when northern, mostly Muslim Seleka rebels seized power. Since then, sectarianism has reportedly defined the conflict in the CAR. Thousands have died and tens of thousands have been displaced. Others have fled their homes and sought refuge in neighboring countries. That's coming up next, right here on Straight Talk Africa. Hello, welcome to a special edition of Straight Talk Africa. It's Wednesday, November 12th. I am Shaka Ssali.
And hello to all of you at home or at work on the continent and elsewhere. I'm glad to be with you today. I'm Mariama Diallo, your social media reporter.
Today, we'll introduce you to three religious leaders from the Central African Republic who are here to bear witness to the whole world on what is going on in their nation and their tireless quest for peace.
The key word here is peace in the Central African Republic. Well, coming up later in our STA inbox, we'll share some of your thoughts on the current situation. Hope you'll stay with us.
But first, the Ebola crisis and Boko Haram in West Africa, Syria and Iraq turmoil in the Middle East have caused some to ask, has the world forgotten about the conflict in the Central African Republic? My colleague Paul Cisco has more.
On the eve of a national holiday in the United States, Veterans Day, pictures of violence-torn Central African Republic are exhibited at the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C. Attending the event and in the U.S. Capitol, seeking international support to end the war, are three religious leaders from CAR. Archbishop Napalinga is the Catholic Archbishop of Bangui.
The state has ceased to exist. The state is limited mostly to Bangui. The rest of the country is lawless. The school system, the health systems, and other functions that are normally taken over by the state has not been able to prevent the misery and poverty all around Bangui. This misery is affecting mostly the young people. It is the youth. It's 50% young people in my country. They are no longer going to school. They have nothing to do. They are easy targets for militia groups, for rebellion. Many have gone off to join other militia groups. So in Bangui, they dream of something else. That dream is, for many of them, death.
Amen Kobini is the president of the Central African Islamic Community.
We, through this interfaith platform, want to bring a focus back on justice and the importance of justice being sought to help us reach reconciliation. Justice can be a tool for reconciliation and for the development of our country.
Reverend Gaya Koyami is president of the Evangelical Alliance of the Central African Republic.
We represent the people, yes, the people of the Central African Republic. This is a wounded people. This is a tired people. This is an abused people. And they are also disillusioned. We are the spokespeople for people who have no voice, for people who are speechless, for a population that does not have weapons but only has words in order to express their anguish.
They speak for those in the CAR who simply want to live in peace, but have been unable to for years. Nearly 1 million Central Africans have been displaced, fleeing and caught in the middle of attacks and revenge attacks from mostly Muslim Seleka fighters and largely Christian anti-Baleka armed militants. Thousands of civilians have been killed. According to these religious leaders, what some call a religious struggle is more accurately described as a power grab by armed military groups in the face of a weak, non-functioning government. Transitional President Catherine Samba Panza has little or no institutional support and is without the needed funds to provide stability or proper security. French, UN and AU peacekeeping forces are insufficient. However, the religious leaders are united in their reconciliation and peace-building efforts. They're calling on the international community to significantly and rapidly increase its efforts to bring an end to what some are calling Africa's forgotten crisis. Paul Cisco, VOA News.
Thanks, Paul, for that report. Now joining us here in our Washington studios are three distinguished guests. Monsignor Diodene Nzapalainga, the Archbishop of Bangui, Imam Omar Kobine Layama, President of the Central African Islamic Community, and last but not least, Nicholas Gelokoyame Bangu, the President of the Evangelical Alliance of the Central African Republic. Well, gentlemen, I have to say that I'm profoundly honored and exceedingly humbled to have the opportunity to host the three of you for the first time on Straight Talk Africa.
Thank you.
Merci.
Thank you.
You're most welcome.
Merci.
Thank you.
On a programming note, our three guests are French speakers, and so we will have English translation. Therefore, today, we apologize that we will not be taking your telephone calls. Well, it is interesting that we finally met here in the studios at the Voice of America. And my first question, of course, goes to you, Archbishop Nzapalainga. What specifically brought you here? What did you come to do here, really?
Eh bien, nous sommes venus à Washington.
Well, we came here to Washington to speak for the voiceless, people from Central Africa who are desperate and want peace and reconciliation.
And what has been the reaction so far from the people that you have been able to meet?
Nous sommes à Washington pour une deuxième fois.
We are in Washington for the second time. The first time, it was just to get in touch for awareness. Now, we think that a lot of people understood that it was very dire, that people need to act. And we trust that the United States are going to act with all of those who are already our partners.
Well, Imam Umar, what about your experience so far? Do you agree with your colleague? Is that the sort of reception that you have received?
C'est juste pour le compléter. Parce
I just want to add to what he said, because we're here to add to each other, to complete each other. So about our visit here, it is just as he said it, but I can add that we have been very well welcomed, just like the first time in March 2013, people welcomed us very warmly. And the follow-up is very positive. But now the situation in the field is more complex. And so we've come here to explain the pressing needs, the wishes of the people of the CAR, so that the services in the field would improve.
Reverend Gelekoyam, what about you? What is it that you have noticed this time around that you didn't experience the last time you were here in March? Has there been any significant difference so far in these two different visits to Washington?
Nous avons remarqué avec beaucoup de
We have
satisfaction
noticed with a lot of satisfaction that the American authorities, both on the religious side and on the political side, were very attentive to what we had to say. And we've also noted that between March and our second trip here, a lot of things happened. The U.S. Embassy in Bangui has been reopened. USAID has resumed its activities in the CAR. And we think that the more we can explain the situation of the Central African Republic to the U.S. authorities, the more we see that they are aware, that they have understood our explanations, and we are happy about it.
What about reports that despite the fact that you do have different groups of peacekeepers,
You have those under the African Union. You have those under the French army. What about reports that there is no proper coordination and that therefore, in fact, that has been able to cause problems? Is that something that you'd like to talk about?
Oui, mais tout à fait. Lorsque
Yes,
chacun a
absolutely.
son commandement,
Everybody has his own command in a very complex crisis. This is a problem. This is why we are always pleading, we are encouraging all the forces present in the country to organize themselves under the United Nations flag, because it's the United Nations that is covering the entire world. And so if the UN are present in the Central African Republic, I don't see why we can still talk about the EU forces on the one hand, the French forces on the other hand. I think we should unify the command, the military command, to be a lot more efficient in the field.
I see. Well, Archbishop, obviously, you have been able to meet, for example, the Secretary General of the UN in the process of your search for peace. Have you been able, for example, to put that question to him to see if, in fact, he can perhaps raise it with the UN Security Council that the peacekeepers in Bangui should have a joint command?
Cette question, nous la faisons remonter.
We always ask this question to whoever is in charge, and I think in the field there's a representative of the Secretary General. We met him. Here we saw that our wishes were not answered. So it is high time to push higher and to ask the decision makers, the Secretary General, the US government, which is paying 28% of the UN budget. So it should be up to the sacrifices made by American citizens so that Africa is in peace again.
What about reports that, and I'm talking to you, Imam Umar, what about reports that there are actually some situations where one of the peacekeeping forces is, for example, perceived to be in support of one of the major militias, because you do have the Sereka militia, which reflects the elements of Muslims, and then you have the anti-Baraka, which reflects the Christian, elements. Is there any evidence on the ground, in as far as you are concerned, that some of these peacekeeping groups are indeed perceived or support one group vis-à-vis the other?
This is the image that some people have, and not everybody agrees. What does that mean? The groups have different commanders, so they share different commands. So one group, for instance, MINUSCA is in a given area. Sangaris is another area, and also in the capital. And LEFOR, the European army, is in yet another zone. So everybody thinks that these people are there. It's only to protect this particular religious community. It's a false perception. That's why we are asking that there should be only one single command to cover all these forces, so that the average citizen doesn't think that this particular force is there to protect Muslims and that one is there to protect only Christians. These forces should be protecting the entire population of the country.
I see. Well, before we pause for a short break, would like to remind you that Straight Talk Africa is on the social networking website Facebook. Just enter the keyword Straight Talk Africa, become a fan and connect with other friends of the Voice of America. We'll be right back with you, so please don't go away.
Sia Nyama Karoma, the First Lady of Sierra Leone, speaks to VOA on the Ebola crisis.
I would want the people in West Africa to know that Ebola is real. Ebola kills, Early detection and prompt treatment can save lives, and I'm asking our people not to victimize or stigmatize survivors. Ebola is a challenge, but together we'll all be able to overcome it.
That was Sia Nyama Koroma, the First Lady of Sierra Leone, speaking to VOA Africa on the Ebola crisis.
How do you see the world?
I see countries in turmoil.
I see our planet changing.
I see people at peace.
No matter how you see the world, you'll get an unbiased and uncensored view of it on Voice of America, on television, radio, online, and mobile, in more than 40 languages all day, every day. Millions of people tune us in.
How do I see the world? On Voice of America.
Thank you very much. Imam, still with you. We've talked about these different groups of peacekeepers from outside of your country. What about your country? Is there any semblance of an army or a nucleus of some sort of a national army? What happened to the former national army?
C'est aussi l'autre point que nous avons.
This is the other point that we mentioned in all our visits here with different authorities, NGOs, with the American public. The problem of our security. We don't really have an army right now. Our government does not have an army. And the problem is the same. Every time there is a problem, there's killing sprees, looting. When we meet the authorities of the UN forces, we asked them, we said, what is going on? How come you didn't protect goods and persons? It is the responsibility of your government, they tell us. And our government can't do it. We don't have an army. We don't even have a police. We don't have gendarmes. And the few people that are there to ensure security have no weapons. All they have is sticks. I mean, in the 21st century, I mean, you can't do that. You can't ensure security just with sticks. We don't understand. We don't understand how the UN resolutions are being applied on the ground, especially since there is an embargo on the Central African Republic. This embargo seems to be turned against the government. Then we can't buy any weapons, so why ask us to ensure the security of the population? If we are embargoed, then it is up to the international community to ensure 100% of people's security.
Interesting. Now, Reverend, I gather that you really do not have a government that is in effective control of the entire country. Is it true that when we talk about a government, we talk about, for example, incumbent President Catherine Samba-Panza, we are really talking about being in control, perhaps, of some parts of Bangui, the capital?
When
you're talking about the efficiency of a government, well, I don't know if the fact that it is not efficient is because of the president, Madame Samba Panza, or if it is wider. We should say that the international community, which is responsible to support the government and the people of the Central African Republic, should play its part, should play its share of the responsibility. The international community has to accompany the CAR government. That's when Madame Samba Panza and her government will be efficient. Give us the means. Give us the means to face our needs, pay the wages, ensure the people's security. And as my colleague was saying, you're talking about an embargo. The embargo is about weapons. I don't think the embargo should paralyze the government. The embargo is to prevent weapons to enter the country, and that is under the responsibility of the international community. They should rebuild. the Central African Republic military so that the security of the country would be the job of the Central African Republic military, its police, and the UN troops, which is the tool of the international community. So we have to have all these efforts at the same time if we want to be much more efficient on all sides.
How can you say, for example, that there is a government in place when reports in fact suggest that it has not been able to succeed at securing a taxation base?
When you know that the entire country, all the provinces are occupied by different armed groups, how can you ask the central government to collect taxes where it is not present, it is not represented? There is no government representative outside of the capital. For instance, if you take Bangui, the capital city, it is not entirely controlled by the government either, because some neighborhoods in Bangui are occupied today by mercenaries who do not want to see security being reestablished anywhere. And so I'm coming back to the same thing, to the responsibility of the international community. They should cover the entire country so that the government could redeploy its civil servant, who then could collect taxes and provide services so that the country can be afloat again.
From what I have heard in talking to your colleagues, Archbishop, it would seem to me that perhaps your country needs more than peacekeepers, that in fact your country might need nation builders. Is that an idea that you'd buy into?
En effet, les artisans de paix
This is true. People who want to make peace are efficient when they can disarm heart and soul. You can grab a weapon from somebody. If he's still not convinced that there should be peace, he will go back. He's going to bring 10, 15, 20 more weapons. So peacemakers have a mission. They have to go deep in people's hearts in order to have fraternity, in order to invite people to development, to invite people to a restart. That's where we think that we, religious leaders, we have a role. Our partners also have a role to play on behalf of humanity, of mankind, so that together we can cast out evil spirits and ask each member of the CAR to be secure humanly, secure socially, and also take part in the development of the country.
Is it possible to bring about peace without, in fact, having first and foremost what people might characterize as the political will, in as far as the people in your country are concerned?
Before reaching that peace, there are prerequisites. Normally speaking, our country has gone through so much that it is high time for the village to gather again. People must speak to each other. What happened? How did it happen? Who is responsible? Who did what? And while talking, there will be therapy. And listening to each other will be relieved. And at the same time, when we are talking, we want for justice to be rendered. Because very often you think that the victims are always victims and will always be victims. We think that another prerequisite is justice. The people who killed should not become ministers, president. It should not be able to divide the country. The international justice, national justice should pursue them. We should know that there is a rule of law in this world and in the other world. But at the same time, what happened, happened, and we can't just keep being obsessed by that. We have to go ahead. We have to open a new page, a page of love, a page of fraternity, a page of reconciliation in order to rebuild a new CAR with the new generation. This is how you get to peace. This is where politicians have their place, because we are not going to take their place. We're not going to do their jobs. We are religious people, and it's up to the politicians to do their job. They must be able to lead a real policy, not for their own party, but one that will help the entire population to be back on the path of happiness.
Imam, your group has almost become a group really of celebrities. You recently visited, for example, the Vatican. You met with the Pope. What was it like for an imam to meet the Pope, Pope Francis?
Je pense que la paix
I think that peace is a common aim for all religions. And the Pope is a peace ambassador. He's somebody who's always against the violation of human rights. So we are linked together by this peace, the word of peace. When we say hello to each other, it's the word peace. We always say, peace be with you. The Muslims always say, peace be with you. So this is how we are linked through the word peace. And if we had, when we visited the Pope, it's so that he would support us in our pleading for peace on behalf of the Central African people. And he did it. He supported us. He always took into account the suffering of our people in his prayers, in interfaith prayers. It is an important gesture for peace made by the Pope.
It is interesting that a major French daily newspaper, Le Monde, dubbed you as the three saints of Bangui. Have we heard about that?
Bon, c'est ce que les gens disent.
This is what people say. We never wanted to be saints or to take their place. We are here to plead the cause of the people of the CAR. And if people think that this is the job that saints used to do, I mean, men of God, and that they recognize us as such, well, we can always only say thank you and ask all of them to make sure that we really become saints. Thanks to their prayers, and we should be the saints of peace.
Now that you are perceived to be saints of peace, is there anything tangible, anything that you can touch on and say, you know what, Shaka, this is what we have since accomplished?
Nous, ce que nous avons accompli,
what we have accomplished, number one, is that we have given the chance to the Central Africans not to be totally swept by the political storm that imposed a war on us, a religious war. This is the main act that we achieved, so that today believers are protected. You saw that the Christians were welcoming Muslims in their churches. This is the act that we accomplished. And we've also organized workshops for social cohesion with Selekas and Anti-Balakas, who afterwards committed themselves to social cohesion. But, you know, we are only humans, and there's always constraints. Our constraint is at the security level. We only have the word. We don't have a force. And we've come here to ask for the support of a great nation which fights against intolerance and injustice in the world, like the U.S., with other nations in the world, in order to help us disarm our extremists, the ones who take as hostages our communities.
Very interesting. You're tuned into Straight Talk Africa. We'll have more of a discussion in a moment. But first, here is Mariama Jaro. Mariama, take it away, please.
Well, thanks, Shaka. Still to come, we'll reveal some of the outstanding feedback we've received from all of you guys who listen to us on the radio or watch us on TV or via web. But now, here is our letter of the week from a viewer in Abuja. Nigeria.
Omunua Okugbo from Abuja in Nigeria writes, interfaith dialogue is a very effective peace-building tool in the Central African Republic's conflict because it gives all the sense that every individual, regardless of his or her religious affiliation, is worthy of love and respect. However, there must be realistic plans for economic development that gives hope to the masses. Peace cannot be sustained in an atmosphere of material poverty and hopelessness.
Like Voice of America on Facebook. Follow VOA on Twitter. Join VOA on our YouTube channel. Like, follow, join VOA.
Welcome back to Straight Talk Africa, live from Washington. Once again, it's time to bring in my colleague and social media reporter, Mariama. Take it away again, Mariama.
Well, as violence ravages the Central African Republic, three gentlemen of different faith whom you've been watching and listening to on our program today have been working tirelessly for peace in order to hold their country together. They are religious leaders who say they are actually doing what their faith has called them to do. Their Interfaith Peace platform is spreading a message in villages throughout their nation as they advise political leaders on a vision of peace. Is it working? Well, this is the million-dollar question that brings us to our question of the week, asking, to what extent do you think that an interfaith perspective is an effective peace-building tool in the Central African Republic's conflict? Well, thanks everyone for using all our social media platforms to tell us what you think. Let's begin with a comment from Frank Mulenga in Lusaka, Zambia, who writes, both Christians and Muslims have a role to play to keep peace in the CAR, for there are many African countries where Christians and Muslims live in peace. Another comment comes from Bob Akampurira in Kampala, Uganda, who says, religious leaders and their followers make choices as to the meaning of the sacred and the content of their faith. These choices in turn determine their attitudes toward conflict and violence, which in turn will bring peace in the region. So I think if we are to have peace in the Central African Republic, religious leaders should join the cause through preaching reconciliation and harmony. Well, which is exactly what these three gentlemen are trying to do. Shaka and guest.
What about you, Reverend? How do you react to that?
La réconciliation, le pardon.
Reconciliation, forgiveness, this is what we are preaching, because we think that it is true. Something divided us, but we lived it in our blood, in our flesh. But beyond that, we have to understand that as long as there is life, we are condemned to live together, just like teeth and the tongue are condemned to live together in the mouth. And as religious leaders, we are saying that we have a message of hope to preach. We preach faith, we preach hope, and we are saying that whatever you can believe of this crisis in the CAR, whatever you believe, peace will come back. Calm will come back. Reconciliation between the citizens will come back. As long as we, religious authorities, will remain faithful to the ideal that God gave us, that is to say, to live together.
Very interesting. Mariama, what is people saying on social media?
Well, we'll move on to a post from Akira Kitara, from Dar es Salaam in Tanzania, who says that an interfaith perspective is an effective peace-building mechanism among the communities in the CAR because it could allow religious tolerance that brings about shared meanings of faith and coexistence of the communities. And finally, let's look at another one from Michael Amaze from Benin City in Edo, Nigeria this time, who writes, from the looks of things in Africa, it seems that religion has not helped matters. If you view it from the comment of some religious leaders, it has not been comfortable. So interfaith will not help matters, but economic development could let our political leaders do the right thing by engaging the youth. An idle mind is the devil's workshop. If the youth, who are important stakeholders in the nation building, are engaged constructively, there could be peace in Africa. Well, Shaka and guests, I believe the viewer is not really dismissing your work in helping find peace in the Central African Republic, but he's tossing out some ideas on other ways to address the current problem. So what do you make of it?
Archbishop, it is all yours. How do you react?
Je voulais remercier tous ceux
I would
qui ont
like to
réagi
thank
à
all
chaud
of those
concernant
who
ce
reacted
que nous avons
to
dit,
what
ce
we
que
have been
nous
saying
vivons
or
avec
to
les
what
citoyens.
we are living
Je voulais
through
dire
in the
aussi
CAR.
aux jeunes qui réagissent
I'm
ou à
also
certaines
saying
personnes
to
qui nous
young
écoutent
people who are listening
que
to us
la jeunesse en
that
Centrafrique
youth
est
in
une
the Central
clé
African Republic is a key.
pour le changement.
It is a key
Et
for
nous nous sommes
change.
investis à
And
fond
we
pour
invested
aller à la
ourselves
rencontre de ces jeunes, pour
in
les
order to
écouter,
meet
pour
these
leur
young people,
demander
to listen to
que
them,
ce n'est pas par la violence
to
qu'on pourra
ask
trouver
them
des solutions.
not to
Et
look
nous
for
prenons à bras le
solutions
corps la
through
question de
violence.
pauvreté.
And
Qui est
we're
en
also
situation de
taking
misère.
into account the
Nous sommes
question of
ici.
poverty.
Nous avons demandé au gouvernement
We
américain
have come here to
d'appuyer la
ask the U.S.
transition.
government
Je le
to
dis,
support
nous ne
the
substituons pas aux
transition.
politiques.
As I said,
Nous
and I
gardons
repeat
notre
it,
poste,
we
et
are
nous
not the
encourageons
politicians.
à
We are
ce
not
que
wanting
notre
to do their
jeunesse
job.
sorte de
But
l'oisiveté,
we would like to
puisse
make
avoir
so
une
that
scolarité,
our youth can
puisse
go to
travailler,
school, can get a
s'engager et
job,
aussi
can get out
apporter
of
sa contribution
idleness,
au niveau
bring
de ce
its
village qui
contribution
s'appelle le monde.
to
Et on
this
peut pas
village, which is
rester
now
indifférent.
the
Donc, je crois
world.
que
We
ce
can't
que
be
les jeunes
indifferent. So I
ou
think
les
that
gens ont, leurs
what
réactions sont les bienvenues.
young
Parce
people
que
are saying,
plus
this
nous
is
allons être
welcome, because
ensemble,
the
la
more we are
question de
together,
la proximité,
the
de
more
solidarité,
it is
de
going to
tolérance,
be
de
solved.
dialogue,
There's
nous
a
les vivons au
question of
quotidien. Et
solidarity
j'encourage
and dialogue.
les
We
autres
live that
leaders
every day, and I
religieux à se
encourage
mettre ensemble
other
pour plan
religious
d'héritage
leaders
à
to
découvrir.
get together and to discover the same thing we did.
Talk to us very, very briefly about what you characterize as, quote, peace schools, unquote.
Alors, les écoles de paix,
Peace
c'est
schools.
des lieux où
These
nous
are
avons des jeunes
places where we
qui se
have
retrouvent
young
avec nous
people
et
who
nous leur
meet with
disons,
us,
vu le
and we
contexte
tell
actuel
them that
que nous
given
avons
the
vécu,
actual
il est
context
hors
of
de
our
question de
history,
prêcher la
it is
haine.
out of
Il est
question
hors
to
de
preach
question de prêcher la
hatred.
division.
It is out
Bien
of
au
the
contraire,
question to preach
modérer,
division.
changer,
On the
convertir
contrary,
sa
we have to
langue
change.
pour transmettre
We
un
have to
message qui
convert
va
our
rapprocher
tongue
les
in
jeunes
order to
entre eux,
transmit a
un
message that is
qui va
going to
leur
bring young
permettre
people
de
together,
forger un
a
avenir.
message that is
Et nous
going
avons
to
vu que
allow
chez nous,
them to forge
en
a
mettant les
future.
jeunes autour
And we
d'une
saw
table, en
that
les
in
aidant
our
à
country,
s'approprier
when they
ces
get
projets,
together,
eux-mêmes
when
se sentaient
they have
heureux,
ownership
et eux
of
sont
these
devenus
projects,
les
they are happier.
ambassadeurs de la
And
paix.
they have
Ils
become
partaient dans les
peace
communautés
ambassadors.
musulmanes,
They spread
protestants,
out
catholiques
in
pour dire la paix.
Protestant
Et nous avons
communities,
vu que
in
nous
Muslim
sommes heureux de
communities, in
voir que
Catholic
le
communities,
message,
to preach peace.
l'intuition que
And
nous
we are
avons
very
reçue
happy
n'est
that
pas restée
our
à notre
intuition
niveau, seulement
didn't
adulte,
stay
mais
among
les jeunes
us.
épousent
It was
parce que
spread
l'avenir
around
est
the
là.
young
Il appartient
people
à la mixité,
because it
au
is
brassage,
their
et non à
future,
la
and
division
the future
ou au
is
repli
to
communautaire.
mix all together and not to stay with our communities.
Very interesting again. Thanks, Mariama, for bringing us this week's audience reaction.
Well, that does it for today's social media segment. Thanks to our guests for responding to our audience. And I forgot to say in the language bonjour and bienvenue earlier. So this time I'm going to take advantage and say thank you in French as well to our gentlemen. Merci beaucoup, messieurs. Just a reminder that we appreciate all the feedback, whether it's in social media form or using other means to communicate to us. Please, please keep them coming. And if you are a new fan, just drop us a line at africatv@voanews.com. Once again, our email address is africatv@voanews.com. Or post your comment on our Facebook page. Just enter the keywords Straight Talk Africa. Be sure to visit us online at voaafrica.com, or you can join our YouTube channel. Simply subscribe to VOA TV to Africa. Now, let's take a look at what's on tap for next week's program.
What exactly is Ebola?
Can I catch Ebola through the
Are
air?
the people who have it contagious?
What is our government doing about Ebola?
What are the symptoms of Ebola? You have questions about Ebola? Straight Talk Africa has answers. VOA presents Straight Talk Africa, Ebola, Knowledge is Life, a special town hall meeting with leading experts on the front lines who will answer many of the questions surrounding the Ebola outbreak. VOA presents Straight Talk Africa, Ebola, Knowledge is Life, November 19th, only on VOA.
Welcome back. Today we are hosting 3 religious leaders from the Central African Republic who are here to bear witness to the whole world on what is going on in their nation and their tireless quest for peace. Our distinguished guests are Monsignor Diodone Nzapalainga, the Archbishop of Bangui, Imam Omar Kobine Layama, President of the Central African Islamic Community, and last but not least, Nicholas Gelekoyame Bangu, the President of the Evangelical Alliance of the Central African Republic. On a programming note, our 3 guests are French speakers, and thus we have English translation. Therefore, today we apologize that we are not able to take your telephone calls. I hope you'll find some space in your beautiful hearts to forgive us for that. Well, let me come to you, Imam, again. You and your fellow panelists have said that the war in your country is not sectarian. It has nothing to do with religion. It's just about hungry, greedy, selfish people who are fighting for power. Is that true?
Exact.
Absolutely.
Exact,
absolutely.
Vous voyez, quand on voit, vous avez fait visionner tout à l'heure.
You showed us earlier
quelque chose sur les anti-Balaka,
something about the anti-Balaka, about the Seleka.
L'objectif des Seleka pour aller au pouvoir n'était pas pour aller défendre
it was not to defend the Quran. It was not to turn churches into mosques. Their objective was different. It was to seize power, because they thought that whoever is in power had probably badly managed the country before, didn't help their region, didn't have a good ethnic policy, didn't have a Republican policy, and there's many reasons. And they had amulets on them. These amulets are not allowed by the Quran. You can't wear amulets. This is forbidden by Islam. You also saw the anti-Balaka was the same voodoo signs with amulets, with gris-gris as we call it. These people have adopted another culture, thinking that this culture could give them victory. They are convinced of their right. They didn't think that God existed, because if you think that God exists, you're not going to loot, to rape, to kill, to assassinate, break human rights. If you're a believer, you don't behave like this. And the Seleka didn't have an imam at their head either. They didn't have any Muslim religious authorities leading them. They didn't ask the Muslims to go kill the Christians. And look at the Christians. The Archbishop is here, the pastor is here. They did not ask the anti-Balaka to go kill Muslims. This is not religious at all. This is really a diabolical political plan to seize power. And they use the religious fiber of people to get there.
How do you respond to someone who says that, on the contrary, the problem of Africa, not particularly limited to your country, is because in Africa, in order for you to have access to power, you have to go through what they call cross-cultural groupings, which includes religious organizations, ethnic communities or tribes and clans. How do you respond to that?
C'est pour cela que nous pensons qu'au niveau de la
why
plateforme, nous
we
pensons que
think
l'Afrique a tellement souffert de cette
Africa really
devenu
suffered throughout its history
finalement une
of this
pratique
practice.
traditionnelle
It
pour
is
nos hommes
a
politiques.
traditional practice now for our
Et que nous
politicians.
pensons qu'il est temps
We think
que
that
les
it is
religieux
high
puissent
time
jouer pleinement leur
for
rôle.
religious authorities to play their
Leur
role.
rôle d'appel à la
Their role
fraternité, à la
is to
tolérance, à
call
l'amour.
for fraternity,
Parce que tous ces
tolerance, and
politiques-là
love, because
sont des adeptes
all
dans
these
nos religions. Ils
politicians,
sont
of
à la
course,
fois
are
chrétiens comme
members of
musulmans.
our religions.
Et
They are
que
Muslims,
nous
they
devons
are
jouer notre
Christians.
rôle,
We should play our
pleinement de
role
pasteur, pour
of
les
pastors
conscientiser,
in
à
order
savoir
to
que,
make them
leur amener à
aware,
se comprendre que
to
le
bring
pouvoir
them to
appartient à
an
Dieu.
understanding
Il
that
donne à qui il veut, il le
power
reprend à tout
belongs to
moment. On
God.
ne peut pas-
God gives
on ne
it
peut
to
jamais
whoever
chercher
He
le pouvoir
wants
par
and
la
can
force,
take it back. It is an
par
illusion to try
l'instrumentalisant
to seize
la
power
religion,
by force,
l'ethnie,
using
une
religion,
communauté.
using
Non.
your
Et on ne
ethnic
peut pas
group,
la garder-
using a
garder aussi ce
community.
pouvoir
And you can't keep
de la
that
même
power
manière.
the same
Mais
way.
il faut bien gérer,
You
il
have
faut
to
bien faire.
manage the country
Dieu, là,
well.
à qui
And
appartient le pouvoir,
it is God who has the power.
c'est Dieu qui va
God
transformer
will
le cœur
transform
de
the
ceux que vous
heart
avez le pouvoir sur
of
eux,
people
de
who
vous
have the
accepter,
power.
de
He's
vous
going
aimer
to accept
et de
you,
vous accompagner.
and He's going to love you.
Is it true, if I may ask you this question, that when the Sereka militia, the rebels led by Michel Jotodia, when they arrived in Bangui and seized power, they approached you for your support and you rejected to be associated with them?
D'abord, au contraire.
First of all, on the contrary, they told us, well, I was with the Archbishop, they said it's your fault. It is why we lost power. So they could never be with me, because from the very beginning of their race to power, I said no to their activities. I denounced what they were doing. So before even seizing power, I was already considered as an enemy by them. I was considered as opposing their objective. They never asked me anything. And President Gotodia, because of my presence in the platform, has refused to see us for 5 whole months while he was in power. So you see, all this is very complex. They had a religious vision, but I had the voice of religion. My voice was listened to, both by the Muslims and by others. But I refused to be associated to their power. I refused to get along with their project.
A reminder that you are tuned into Straight Talk Africa. We'll continue our discussion in a moment with our 3 religious leaders from the Central African Republic. We'll be right back with you, so please don't go away.
We are able to touch on things that are important to people on an everyday basis. We hope that our viewers are getting inspired when they watch our show. They're getting a view of the world from a different perspective, things that perhaps are not in their immediate vicinity. Today, I could put in on the show something that is a little different, a little unique, and this gives me that inspiration to come to work.
If you like today's show, please write and tell us what you think or give us some suggestions. Be sure to tell us what station you're tuned into. Our address, Straight Talk Africa, Voice of America, 330 Independence Avenue Southwest, Washington, D.C. 20237 USA. Or send us an email at africatv@voanews.com. Log on to our website at voaafrica.com. Or post your comments on Facebook. Keywords Straight Talk Africa.
Thank you very much, Esther Gidui. And of course, this is Straight Talk Africa coming to you live from Washington. Let me come to you, Reverend. We did not really forget you. You heard, of course, Imam explaining why Africa suffers from the problem of cross-cultural groupings. How do we move to, for example, the level of the Western world where they say, in as far as they are concerned, they access power through cross-economic groupings, meaning you can have political parties, you can have trade unions, you can have labor movements, You can have professional bodies that you can work your way through to reach to the top without appealing to blood ties.
Vous savez, une nation
You
dépend
know,
aussi de
a nation
la qualité des gens
depends
qu'elle a
on the
produits,
quality of
la
its
qualité des
citizens,
gens, des personnes
the
qu'elle a
quality of the persons that it
Et nous savons
trained.
tous que le problème de
We all know that the
l'Afrique
problem
en ce
of
moment, c'est
Africa today
l'analphabétisme.
is
Et
illiteracy.
généralement, les hommes
And
politiques
generally
jouent
speaking,
sur
politicians
cette fibre
are playing
pour
on
beaucoup
that.
plus
They are
asseoir
playing
leur
on that
pouvoir ou
fiber
leur
in order
autorité.
to
Par rapport à
sit
la
their
question
authority for
posée,
long.
c'est vrai.
To answer your question, it is true.
Les méthodes changent au fil des
Methods
âges.
are changing through
Avant,
the
il
ages.
suffisait d'utiliser
Before, all
les
you needed
syndicalistes
was to use
pour
trade
organiser des
unionists
grèves
to organize
afin de
strikes
renverser un régime
that
et
would topple a
favoriser,
regime and
la
that would
montée au pouvoir
bring
d'un
about
autre leader.
the
À un
seizing
moment,
of power
on a
of another
voulu- on a
leader. At
utilisé
one
la
point,
pauvreté
we used
en
poverty
Afrique pour,
in Africa in
maintenant
order
utiliser,
to
l'argent pour aller
receive money,
au-devant de
in
l'électorat,
order to
corrompre
be able
les esprits
to
faibles
corrupt
pour les
the
amener
weak
à élire quelqu'un qui a
and
les moyens.
push them
On
to
dirait
elect wealthy people.
Un pacha, comme on le dit vulgairement,
Somebody who
pour
behaved as a
l'installer
pasha,
au
as we
pouvoir.
say in Africa,
Mais nous pensons
a
qu'au-delà de
wealthy
toutes
man who
ces
would stay in power
réalités,
forever. I think we
il est
have to go
question
beyond
maintenant
these
que
realities. Now,
l'Afrique, je veux dire
what
les
we
dirigeants
hear
africains,
is that African
emboîtent les
leaders
pas à l'Occident,
should follow what the
qui
West
essaie de
has done.
développer le caractère
They
humain
should
de l'homme,
try to
amener
develop
l'homme à
the
comprendre
human side
que c'est à
of
lui de
the
prendre
citizens.
en main sa destinée.
Tell the
Et la
citizens that
prise en
it's
charge
up to
de la
them to be
destinée de l'homme
responsible for themselves.
l'engage à
And if you take
s'affirmer.
responsibility for
Et cette
yourself,
manière de
then you
s'affirmer,
can be
c'est ce que
yourself.
nous, religieux,
This is what
nous
we,
prêchons.
religious leaders,
Pour
we
que
are
l'homme ne
preaching,
puisse pas dépendre que de
so
l'autre.
that you
Tendre
do
la
not
main,
keep on
demandant,
depending from
de faire
others,
comme si,
beg
on est malade,
with your hand
on est,
extended,
quelqu'un
pretend
qui,
that you're
doit-
sick,
doit toujours bénéficier de
pretend that
l'assistance.
you always need
Lorsque
to
nous nous
have
promenons
support and
à travers
welfare.
le monde
When
pour
we
solliciter
travel
la
around the
compréhension, la
world to
compassion
ask for
de la
people
communauté
to
internationale,
understand us, we
c'est
ask
pas
the
pour
international
maintenir
community
notre peuple
to understand who we
indéfiniment
are.
dans l'état
It is not to
d'assistanat. Mais nous
maintain
voulons
our
simplement dire
people
qu'il y a une
forever
Église qui est aiguë, qui
as
ressemble à une
assisted
personne qui est dans le
peoples.
coma.
We
Et
want
lorsqu'une
to
personne est
support
dans le coma, elle a
our
besoin de
country.
l'assistance
And when
des
somebody is
médecins
in a
de
coma,
toutes
for
les
instance,
spécialités
they need the
pour
doctors, they
lui
need
rendre la vie.
specialists, so that they can
Mais
come
nous
back to
disons que
life.
à
But what
terme,
we are saying is
il
that
faut que l'Afrique
in the
arrive
long
un jour
run,
à
one
se
day,
montrer mature.
Africa
Et
must be
c'est
mature.
lorsque
And
l'Afrique
to
va
show
se
itself
montrer
as
mature
being
que
mature, it is
l'Afrique va
then,
mériter
only
aussi
then,
le
that
respect
Africa is going
des
to
autres.
deserve
Donc,
other nations'
voyez, la
respect.
situation est tellement
So you
complexe,
see,
c'est
the
que
situation is
on ne peut
very
pas
complex.
appliquer
You
ce qui se
cannot
passe en
apply
Afrique anglophone
directly
à
what's
l'Afrique
going on in
francophone.
the
On ne peut
English-speaking
pas appliquer
African
ce qui se passe en Centrafrique,
area to
au Burundi,
West
ou
Africa,
bien
to the
au Rwanda.
French-speaking part of
Il est
Africa,
question
to
que
Burundi
chaque
or to
peuple se
Rwanda.
développe
Each
et se
nation
donne une certaine
must
maturité
develop itself,
pour
must
donner,
mature,
de l'espoir
so
ou de
that they
l'espérance
can
à
give
son peuple.
hope to their citizens.
Yeah, it makes point, especially when you talk about the majority of people in Africa being illiterate. But what about the fact that the largest democracy in the world, India, also happens to have the largest percentage of people who are illiterate? What does that tell us? Isn't it possible, perhaps, that in fact the problem may lie squarely with those of us who are educated or who claim to be educated in Africa, rather than the ordinary person that we claim is illiterate? The Reverend.
Vous savez,
You know,
il est de commun de pouvoir toujours dire
people always say
que l'Afrique a été
that
colonisée
Africa
par les
has been
Occidentaux.
colonized by
Il
the
est souvent
West.
commun de décrier
You hear a
la
lot
colonisation.
that this is why
Mais
we are in a state we're in. But let's all agree that we Africans, among ourselves, we behave like colonizers. People who are intellectuals, people who are educated, who have learned more than others, they are so-called the enlightened. Sometimes it's these people who are exploiting the illiterate. They are using them as if they were subjects, as if they were people who have no right to respect, for instance. And we think that Africa has a history. You cannot say that our ancestors were intellectuals. Back then, you could have an Africa that was brilliant. You could have an Africa that was self-sufficient for food. You had chefs, you had chiefs all around Africa in organized societies. But today, we are trying to collaborate. You see what happens. This is making things much more complicated in Africa, where you have a dominated people and you have people who dominate. And so illiteracy, yes, it is a danger for the development of a given society. But we are saying that most of the problem of Africa is not linked only to illiteracy. It's there. But let's recognize that there are some Africans who are using this illiteracy in order to, as I said, lord it over their compatriots. And the time has come for us to understand that the development of Africa depends on everybody. The illiterate, the erudite, all together, we have a role to play. We have our role. Because don't tell me that somebody who is a so-called intellectual with a given rank will accept to come back to Africa to polish shoes. I mean, we need people at all levels. You need people at a low level and at a high level. But all this should converge, should tend towards a cohesive society. This is what we are looking for. We, the servants of God, we religious leaders, so that everybody can find his daily bread, his place, as we ask God very often. So I'm saying that these factors can be factors of unification as well as they are factors of development. You're not going to find a society where everybody's an intellectual. Even in a state like the United States or France, you will find people who are illiterate, people who have no access to knowledge, and yet they are there, they have a life, and they contribute to the development of the country.
Very interesting. Archbishop, there is a saying that information, in fact, is the oxygen of democracy, of freedom. Do you believe that?
Somebody who is not informed lives in the shadow. It's like the myth of the cavern where people are in the dark. They wish they would be informed. But there is information and information. It is the good, the right information that opens your eyes, that allows for cohesion, that creates links, that creates energies and synergies. These are the good bits of information. That's what we are aspiring for. This is what should be in our life and wake up our conscience. This is what we wish for.
Well, unfortunately, time happens not to be our best ally. On that note, thanks to our three distinguished guests, Monsignor Diodone Nzapalainga, the Archbishop of Bangui, Imam Omar Kobine Layama, President of the Central African Islamic Community, and last but not least, Nicholas Gele Koyame Bangu, the President of the Evangelical Alliance of the Central African Republic. Thanks to affiliate stations, along with our viewers and listeners, we thank you for tuning in. For many of our Voice of America radio affiliates, Learning English is coming up next, and tomorrow morning, it's Daybreak Africa with James Bate. You have questions about Ebola? Straight Talk Africa has answers. Join us next Wednesday for a special town hall with leading experts on the front lines who will answer many of the questions surrounding the Ebola outbreak. Join us next Wednesday, November 19th at 18:30 UTC for a special edition of Straight Talk Africa, Ebola, Knowledge is Life, Town Hall. On that note, it was a pleasure, of course, having you on this program. Come again. Thank you so much. Let's go now.